here we go. Matt LaFleur was on the Chris Sims podcast, right? And I'm hoping I'm getting the right one. I think I've got it here. He was on the Chris Sims Unbuttoned podcast, and he was asked some great questions by Chris Sims. I just want to say Chris Sims done a hell of a job with this interview. Chris Sims being a former NFL quarterback, he was raised by a former NFL quarterback. This dude, whether you like him or not, whether you like his broadcast style or not, he made it to the highest level of football, right? And hearing him question an NFL coach, I thought these questions were fascinating. It's things that most people don't talk about. But let's kind of hit on it here and talk about and let's hear the first question that Chris Sims asked Matt LaFleur. And what he asked him here is it's about unscouted looks. We've talked about Detroit may struggle because they got a new OC and a new DC, right? The reality is Matt LaFleur going into week 1 with Detroit coming to Lambeau, he has unscouted looks on these new OC and DC. Now, you would think if they hired from within, they would continue to do what they do. But the reality is defensive coordinators, even within the same system, have their little nuances, having things that they like to do. Let's see how Matt LaFleur answers the question, and we got a deep dive into unscouted looks. Here we go.
Known than the unknown. I'm just interested in your thought here. Yeah, it's great. Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn are gone, okay, because we know they're really good. But does that necessarily mean it's easier for you? I know NFL coaches. You guys kind of you'd rather the known than the unknown. And now you're going to go, wait, how are they attacking me with this new look? Does that make things a little more confusing with that week 1 matchup?
Oh, absolutely. You might as well throw all the tendencies out the window.
Right.
So,
right.
And I'm sure each coordinator is going to have his own wrinkle. And the bottom line is you just got to be ready to adjust in game. I think just generally speaking, going into week 1, there's going to be unscouted looks. So you better have a plan where your players are very comfortable that no matter what presents itself, that they're confident that they know the rules and can go out there and execute it at a high level against. I mean, they're still one of the premier teams in the National Football League. I know they're losing 2 coordinators, but I've got so much respect for Dan Campbell and the job he's done. I think when you look at Detroit, they've totally taken on his personality.
Right.
You're going to get a tough ass team, and they're going to try to punch you in the mouth for 60 minutes.
No doubt. Or as they say, maybe bite you in the kneecaps, do something like that for sure.
He got a lot of flack for that, but I mean, he's backed it up. So
yes, you're exactly right.
Goes to him.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
All right. So there you go. There was Matt LaFleur with Chris Sims on Chris Sims Unbuttoned talking about those unscouted looks. And here's what we're talking about when we talk about unscouted looks. All right. I said, I just put a little quick article together. I tried not to make it wordy at all, but it's up on the Patreon group. If you guys want to support the show and join our Patreon community, just go to patreon.com/Packer Fan Total Access or scan the QR code in the upper right. With the ever-changing landscape of the NFL, one task coaches have to face is game planning against coordinators they've never faced before. So here's just a quick glimpse at the new staffs for each of the NFC North teams, that other than the Packers, of course. Detroit Lions, Dan Campbell's still the head coach. He's an offensive-minded coach. He played tight end in the league. We know that. Scotty Montgomery's the assistant head coach and wide receivers coach. John Morton is now the offensive coordinator. Kelvin Shepard is now the defensive coordinator. Dave Phipp is the special teams coordinator. You go on the Bears side, and you've got the former offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, Ben Johnson, is now the head coach. He's going to be calling plays. Guess what? Everything you've seen from the Detroit Lions, that's your starting point for game planning the Chicago Bears this year, right? But when you go back to John Morton, the offensive coordinator for the Lions, theoretically, you'd think they want to continue to do what they do, and he was probably brought up in that system. I don't know his exact coaching background or history. However, you got to be prepared for a new OC, new tendencies, right? The offensive coordinator for the Bears really doesn't mean that much. It's Declan Doyle because, again, Ben Johnson will be calling the plays. You want to key in on Ben Johnson's coaching history more than anything. Defensive coordinator Dennis Allen, right? He was with the Saints, if I remember correctly. I don't know where he was last year. I think he was with the Saints last year. Nonetheless, you're probably going to want to go back and start to study what the Saints did a few years ago with Dennis Allen. And go through this entire offseason and get prepared to play against that defense, as opposed to Matt Eberflus, who's been with the Chicago Bears as the defensive-minded head coach the last several years, okay? And then, of course, you get the Minnesota Vikings. You still got Kevin O'Connell. I think everything stayed the same here. I know Brian Flores is still the DC there. Wes Phillips is the OC. Mike Pettin is the assistant head coach.
Oh, that's tough. Hey, I did not know that Antoine Randall L was the Bears' assistant head coach. Did you?
Yeah. See, he came over from Detroit. That's when Ben Johnson brought with him. And here's what's crazy is He's protected, right? Let's say they go out and made us ball out this year and Declan Doyle gets offered a job. If he gets offered a job somewhere as a head coach, I don't think he will, but let's say he does. Guess what? You promote Antoine Randall to OC, but he's also protected as assistant head coach as well.
It's like that lateral / move that's still considered a upgrade. Yeah, and like you said, Dennis Allen, he was with the Saints. He was also with Oakland. But
there you go. Got it. All right, so up next, see, we hit on Minnesota. Okay, so here's what we're talking about here. Let's talk about how you're trying to game plan against teams. And these numbers are going to be hard for you guys to see on the broadcast. I'll make sure that I kind of give you the gist of it right here. Every head coach puts their own spin on how they game plan, although they still approach it with a basic understanding of personnel tendencies and formational tendencies, okay? So when you look at the personnel tendencies here, I'll go full screen, make it a little easier. So when you look at this, what I did was I added in all the NFC North team, the other 3 NFC North teams that are not the Green Bay Packers, obviously. We've got it sorted by rate in which they run specific personnels, okay? So 11 personnel for the Chicago Bears was ran by it was run more than any other personnel than any other coaching staff in the NFC North last year. They ran 11 personnel 71.7% of the time. If you're wondering what the hell is 11 personnel, it stands for 1 running back, 1 tight end, which equals 3 wide receiver sets. Why is that important? You've, as a defense, have got to decide how are we going to play 11 personnel. And 9 times out of 10, the way the NFL defenses play that is they march out their nickel defense. In our case, it's a nickel 4-2-5. You know, when we were under Joe Barry and the other 3-4, Joe Barry, Mike Pettin, all those guys, right, with a 3-4 defense, it was considered a 2-4-5, 2 down line or 2 defensive linemen, 4 linebackers, 5 DBs. That's why it's called nickel, 5 equaling nickel, right? Now, with Jeff Hafley's approach, it's the same personnel. It's just called 4-2-5, and it's considered 4 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers. But I'm telling you, in a 3-4, I used to harp on this all the time because people would say, we need more defensive linemen. I'm going, Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith are defensive linemen. Quit kidding yourself. They're not linebackers, right? Mm-hmm. But that's just how it's approached because you're in a sub package of a nickel 4-2-5 or any kind of nickel for that matter the majority of the time because that team's running 11 personnel. But again, you're going out and you're game planning against Chicago. You're going, okay, boys, our nickel is going to be on the field the majority of the time. Who gives us the best opportunity to match up against the Bears specific roster, whether it's their 3 wide receivers, or the running back they're going to have underneath, or the tight end that they're going to have? Will they push more into 12 this year, what have you? The game plan is set that way. So they ran 11 71.7% of the time last year. Minnesota ran at 56.5% of the time. The Detroit Lions ran at 54.2% of the time. Now, it's worth mentioning the 4th most ran personnel in the NFC North last year was actually Detroit Lions running 12 personnel. So they were more balanced than anyone. So when you go in and you game plan against the Chicago Bears, you're going in thinking, okay, here's what we're going to do, guys. Let's say it's the same coaching staff, right? You're going to go in and go, they're going to be in 11 personnel the majority of the time. Let's prepare our nickel 4-2-5 defense, right? Now, you go in to play Detroit, you got to be going, all right, boys, damn near 35% of the time at 32.2% a clip, we're going to be playing against our 12 personnel, which means we're going to be in our base 4-3. Whether they spread it out empty or not, we got to be prepared to stop the run in our base 4-3. Here's the twist. Now you've got Detroit's numbers are going to carry over to Chicago's numbers. So now you've got 2 teams in the NFC North that at least going into week 1, you got to be prepared for them to run more 12 personnel than anyone else in the entire NFC North. Now, second most 12 personnel is Minnesota Vikings at 24.7%. So I just wanted to start the conversation with that and saying personnel tendency is the first thing that coaches jump into. People play a lot of Madden nowadays, Jacob. They're all about the superstars, the players on the roster, and then which one's got the better player. Well, we need to stop that. But I'm telling you, this is how coaches begin their game plan right here, is by stopping personnel tendency. And if you go on down to the next metric we got, we're sticking with personnel tendency. Now we sorted it by EPA. What's this telling you? This EPA statistic is telling you this is what these teams did the best from an advanced metric standpoint, right? Expected points added in each personnel. So when you look at the Chicago Bears, they're leading the pack here at a positive 0.9 in EPA, right? But it's 12 personnel. Well, they only ran 12 personnel 0.1% of the time. So they were kind of shooting themselves in the foot trying to force out 11 personnel. As you can see, their 11 personnel doesn't even register on the top of this list here, right? Their next better one is...
Does that say the Lions with 13? Does that say the Lions second with 13 personnel?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and EPA. That's right. Yeah. So, and here's the thing. When you go to a more of a base package, like a 12 or a 13 personnel, your success rate for doing what you're supposed to do is going to go through the roof. But again, you're not going to be able to hit home run plays, chunk plays, explosive plays out of a 12 and 13 near as much as 11 personnel. And again, the name of the game in the NFL is hitting explosive plays, passing plays of 20 yards or more, running plays of 10 yards or more. Some people just couple them together, meet in the middle, and say any play over 15 yards or more is considered an explosive play. And when you hit on an explosive play, analytics, statistically speaking, suggests you triple your chances of scoring on that specific drive if you approach it that way. All right. So, yeah, with Detroit, they were second most efficient in terms of EPA out of their 13 personnel. Then the third most efficient offense at 0.52 EPA was the Detroit Lions' 10 personnel. 10 is one running back, no tight ends, meaning one running back, four wide receiver sets. And then you jump into that was 13 plus with Detroit. So those are the even heavier sets. Now we're into 13 personnel, true 13 personnel at positive 0.29. Minnesota Vikings come in. Their most efficient personnel was 22. The reason I'm pointing this out is you identify what personnel they're going to be in and then which personnel are they most effective with.
Real quick, when you say 13 plus, is that a situation where they've got multiple tight ends and also maybe like an extended tackle that's in a tight end instead? Okay.
What we refer to as jumbo set. Go back to the Kevin Berry days. U71 taken, right?
The U71. Yeah, that's what I remember.
So, and again, this is how coaches kind of set up their game plan. They're going in and we're looking for tendencies. And here's what's crazy, man. Across the league, these coaches will have, McCarthy was big on this, and I'm sure Matt LaFleur is as well. Coach McCarthy would have self-scouts. They would have guys in the building scouting themselves to make sure they were not being too predictable in terms of personnel tendencies as well as multiple play calling, all that stuff, right? So now let's go to formational tendency. Now you're looking at, and listen, the purpose of highlighting this, guys, and for everybody listening on the podcast, it's not to go, here's what everybody did well, here's what everybody did. It's to help everybody understand, here's how coaches approach game planning. That's all this is, okay? You can go look this information up yourself, right? And it's available here. I've got all these screen grabs in article form on our Patreon group where you have access to all this information, okay? So formational tendencies. Now we're talking about a 2x2 set being the one that was ran the most in the entire NFC North by the Minnesota Vikings. What's a 2x2 set? It means two wide receivers left, two wide receivers right, or two wide receivers left, a tight end and a wide receiver right, or vice versa. It just simply means two targets on the left, two targets on the right. Some people like to also include the running back if they're in a sidecar. I personally don't like to do that. I just wash the running back out of the equation is how I like to approach that because they're in the backfield and you're going to have underneath keys in your defense to trigger on those guys. So again, Minnesota Viking, 2x2 sets, 37% of the time. Detroit Lions ran 2x2 sets, 37% of the time. The Chicago Bears ran 2x2 sets, 36% of the time. You seeing a trend here, Jacob?
Yeah.
Everybody loves to attack defenses with 2x2 sets. So when you go into your game planning session, you now identify what personnel they're going to be in. Now you're identifying, you also identified what personnel they were most efficient in, and now you're identifying what formations they like to play out of, so you're not caught off guard. And that's why sometimes when you play a team and you beat their ass, and then you go back and play on the second time, you hear it all the time, it's hard to beat the same team twice in the same year because you're going out going, hey, we handled their 2x2 sets really well last time, right? And they're going in going, they beat our brains in with their against our 2x2 sets. Let's go with a little 1x3. Let's go with trips or a tray left or what have you. So, again, that's another way that they game play.
When you're talking about these different formations and packages and all this kind of stuff, as much as we rolled our eyes and absolutely hated certain packages, I'll say maybe the jet sweep motion and certain end arounds and that sort of stuff, do you think it's fair of LaFleur to have to throw maybe 2 or 3, 4 of those plays in each game just to keep that defense honest and to keep them as you're just talking about now when teams are going through that tape and seeing, all right, we got to account for this. You know what I mean? Like that we just have to, whether or not we want to or think they're actually going to use it. Like they're setting us up with that jab. Eventually they're going to throw that right hook. Is that kind of, do you think coaches intentionally put in a play or a package where they know, like, I don't actually expect this to do anything, but it's going to keep the defense honest?
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about in the next segment how they dress up plays, and Matt LaFleur was asked about that by Chris Sims as well. That totally happens, Shay. Totally happens. And you might just have a burner play where it's like, you know what, we're going to run a slip screen. Let's do it out of a tray right look, knowing we're going to be playing a crap ton. I about cuss. I love football, man. I get so amped up. You know you're going to be playing a ton of 2x2. Well, let's throw in a tray right, knowing we're going to slip screen to the left. And that's just kind of a burner play. Like, we know where the ball's going there. There's no read in the formation. It's we're going to slip in a screen here. Let's do that with a tray look so it kind of keeps them guessing. Crap, they may run some tray. We might be ready to adjust in that regard. And then you may, again, we'll talk about in a minute, dressing up plays. You may start out in a tray look, but end up by the time the ball's snapped in a 2x2 set, right? So that comes into play. So you got to get down to the fourth. Most ran offensive formation of the Chicago Bears with a 1x3 set. That could be trips or tray right. If it's 1x3, then it means 1 target on the left, 3 on the right. If there's a tight end attached, that's tray. If it's all 3 wide receivers and the tight end's a nub left, then that's called trips right. Okay. So if it said 3x1, which you see the first 3x1 set comes in from the Detroit Lions here, 7th on the list at 16.9% of the clip. 3x1 means trips or tray left with 1 target on the right. That's all that means. So you always work from left to right, whether it's the play call diagram and you identifying and communicating what the play is itself or the formational aspect. So now when you go to formation.
Can I just real quick say something? Yeah. I'm sure you maybe listened to it, but Greg Cosell was on the Ross Tucker podcast, I believe, within the last 2 weeks. And they were talking, I think, specifically about Savion Williams and Mike Golden, trying to see how they would fit and whether or not they were quote unquote an X and all this. And Greg Cosell, which obviously I don't have to tell you, Clayton, is the great GOAT, the living GOAT, as Tucker calls him. He was talking about how certain formations, certain sets are kind of moot because of how much pre-snap motion they can do nowadays. So you can take a 2x2, just simply throw a guy in motion and completely screw up that pre-snap motion or the pre-snap reads that they thought they had just with a single guy going in motion. And that kind of takes away a certain height and size limitations that you quote unquote, he's the X, he can't be out there. He's only 5'10", blah, blah, blah. It's
Exactly.
like you literally just throw him inside on a short motion and that quote unquote problem's taken away.
There's a lot of factors that come in. They use it to identify man coverage, meaning if the guy follows that, okay, we're going from a 2x2 set to a tray set after the cheat motion. It does multiple things. It gives the quarterback information. And even if they're in a zone, you can kind of pick up on which safety's diving into the box, which one's dropping deep. If they're in some kind of cover 3 match look, it also tells you if it's man coverage. It also gives your receiver an advantage because he's got a full sprint horizontally where he's going to be kind of running full speed as soon as the ball snapped, as opposed to just starting from a dead stop. There's a lot of things. We'll talk about that here in a second in the next segment. It's going to be awesome. Chase Green in the chat said, Clayton, I love your chalk talks. Do you agree that 21 personnel is better for short yardage? I like how we can run it or pass it out of that set. Absolutely. Here's the other thing you can do, Chase. You can come out to 21 personnel, right, which is 2 running backs, 1 tight end, therefore being 2 wide receivers. But if you've got Musgrave as your tight end, guess what you can do? You can come out with that 21 personnel, go pony package, and empty everything else out. Now you've got the tight end flexed out wide, and you've got a mismatch with someone like a Luke Musgrave who's got really good speed, but a 6'5" or a 6'6" frame, whichever tight end it is. They've got to decide, do we put a shorter backer on him that's going to have less speed as well, or do we put a safety on him? Because they're trying to match personnel. And that's where you get into some of the old school Greg Williams approach, the Mr. Bountygate guy down there with the Saints. That wasn't the only thing he did well down there, was putting bounties on players' heads in the game. He went to a dime set because he got tired of getting outmatched like that. And he knew it was a pass-heavy spread offense league there in the late 2000s, early 2010s, right? So all that. And again, the league's cyclical right now. As Chase is saying, 21 personnel has been kind of popular. However, it doesn't mean there's not more 11 personnel than everything else. But yeah, for short yardage, theoretically speaking, but what I really like to see is a 21 personnel and then empty it out. You want to watch a defense scramble. They come out in a base 4-3, and all of a sudden you're going in an empty gun set. They're going, what in the hell do we do with this?
Dude, and what about if one of the 21 personnel running backs is Savion Williams?
Exactly. And that's you can, Jacob, you can now come out with a 10 personnel look, right? If you're Green Bay, let's say Savion is a hit, right? He's just they nailed this draft pick. You can come out with a 10 personnel look, flex Josh Jacobs, flex them both out wide. And now they're going, oh crap. All right. So we were in 10. We're already in our dime. We're good. We're good against the pass. They're in an empty. And then pre-snap motion Savion back into the backfield. And now you've got a more advantageous look for your offense because even though you're showing 10, and your running backs flexed out wide, let's say Josh Jacobs is flexed out wide too, you bring Savion in the backfield, they got to decide, do we put a backer on Savion to help, that one linebacker? Because with a dime set, it's essentially 6 DBs and one linebacker with a 4 down line in front, right? So they got to decide, do we put a corner in the box now on Savion, or do we put a backer in there? And if they bring the backer in and you pre-motion him into the backfield, you come set, let Jordan read the play. Okay, cool. Holy cow, they got a backer on him. Let's bring Savion out of the backfield now. Now you've got a passing game mismatch with the wide receiver on a linebacker. And that's like stealing a Mountain Dew from a baby down here in Appalachia. I'm just telling you. So, all right, guys, time got away from us there. We're nerding out, obviously. So that's going to do it for hour 1. For those of you listening on the pod, we'll see you on the other side for hour 2. We'll continue this. All right. Welcome into hour 2. Let's continue.
Those of you listening on the pod.
Hey, we did it live today. I like it, man. Shout out to Badger Trio, too. Been a member for 6 months here on YouTube. Appreciate you, buddy. I like early short week. We have all camp prep, both. I don't know what that means. Jacob, can you decipher that for me, sir? I like early short week. We have all camp prep. But oh no, I see what you're saying. Okay, got you. The early short weeks on the schedule. I thought about that the other day too, Badger Trio. That kind of hit me like it looks kind of bad on the surface, but we always talk about getting off to a slow start in the Matt LaFleur era, right? So this should help that. We should be able to get off to a fairly quick start, albeit the first 2 games of the season are arguably our toughest games of the year. So, all right. So moving on, formation tendency EPA wise, the Detroit Lions, when they run a 4x1 set, they led the NFC North in EPA at plus 2.5. What that means is a 4x1 set, most likely an empty look, but what we call a quad left look. You'll hear me on Chalk Talk say quad left or quad right. That means you've got 4 targets on one side of the formation. Again, this may be broken down including a running back. I personally don't do that. If I say quad, it means there are 4 targets. There's nobody in the backfield, and there are 4 targets up near the line of scrimmage on the left side of the formation. So that's what a 4x1 set is. So the 4x1, the Detroit Lions led an EPA to plus 2.5. Now, keep in mind, these may be third and extra long sets where they didn't even pick up the first down. And the reason the EPA is inflated is because the defense was playing soft and playing what we call the sticks to prevent the first down, right? Because Minnesota's top EPA, the second highest EPA in terms of formation tendency, was a plus 1.74. They were also in a 4x1 set. Third is the Detroit Lions with a 1x4 set, right? And then, of course, you got a 1x1 set that were Detroit. So, again, these are the things that coaches look at when they're game planning for specific opponents. Now, let's nerd out a little bit here, give you an illustration of what a 2x2 set is, okay? We kind of talked about it, right? This is a 2x2 set. And if you can see my cursor here, you notice 1, 2 on the left, 1, 2 on the right. Now, we've got the Y flexed out with the Mike walked out on him here on defense, right? So this is an ace set, which we've got an ace 2x2. That's what we mean by 2x2. I just want to give you guys an illustration of it real quick so you know what we're talking about. When we say 1x3, again, you go from left to right. 1 target on the left, 3 on the right. In this specific situation, it's a tray right look. The reason it's tray right is because the tight end is a part of those 3 targets on the right. Again, if this X was on this side of the formation and this Y was the only nub on the left, we would call that a trips right. When it's 3 wide receivers on one side, it's trips. When there's a tight end that's a part of it, it's called tray. So you could identify that specific play 2 different ways. You could say nub left or tray right. Or I'm sorry, nub left or trips right. In this case, it's a tray right because the tight end's on that side. All right. But again, that's what we mean by 1x3 set that we've identified up here. All right. While game planning against opposing defenses, coaches typically begin with success rate or lack thereof. EPA is a great measure that coaches use to determine how efficient defenses are against the run and the pass. This is a quick way to identify weak points in their opponent's game plan. So now you're looking at the defensive side of the play, of the game planning aspect, and you look at their EPA per pass play, right? So we couldn't do the NFC North in this specific situation, but what this is identifying is the lower the number, in this case, a negative 0.34 with the Denver Broncos, they had the most successful EPA per pass, right, of anybody in the NFL last year at a negative 0.14, not 34. I apologize. So with that being said, if you're playing the Broncos, you're going in going, boys, their pass defense is stout. What's their run defense look like? We might want to press into that, right? Well, the Broncos had a good defense last year. When you go EPA per rush, they're third in the league at a minus 0.12. So you want to know why they played so well with a rookie quarterback. Their defense was pretty solid last year. So when you go in and you're scouting these teams, you're looking formations, you're looking tendencies, you're looking EPA and specific formations, you're looking at EPA and personnel, all these different factors. You're also going in, the starting point's probably right here, Jacob. Are you going, what are they better at, stopping the run or stopping the pass? Let's build our game plan around attacking their deficiency, right? So when you look at the NFC North, like for instance, the defense for the Detroit Lions last year, and now they've got a new defensive coordinator, obviously, their EPA per pass was third best in the league, right? And their EPA per run play, as you could see, was 18th best in the league. So you would go in against the Detroit Lions and go, boys, let's try to get this running game going early. Let's get them on there. Let's jump out to an early lead. So that's how you would approach that aspect of the game plan. So, but just to wrap that up, this is all just scratching the surface of how coaches key in on tendencies for their upcoming opponents. Again, Matt LaFleur mentioned that, and I thought, why don't I try to put a little illustration together for the Patreon community on what he's talking about there? Jacob, does that all make sense, or did I rattle jaw for 30 minutes for no reason?
No, that makes sense. And I think it does help kind of break down what a lot of these terms, the terminology, certain metrics definitely mean. And I honestly think that when you look at that list, that again, the Packers get a lot of hate, but we had a pretty decent year on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
We really did.
Yeah, if we were to try to identify Green Bay, I think they're both in the top 10, right? Or right at it.
I thought 7th and 8th, I believe.
Yeah, defensively, we were 7th in pass defense in terms of EPA per pass. And then running defense, we were 8th in EPA per rush. However, this measurement isn't everything. You know, I point out yards per carry as well, right? Because again, if it's a 3rd and 7 situation and somebody runs a draw play, their EPA is going to show a successful play because they might have gained 6 yards on a running play, right? However, you prevented them from moving the sticks. So again, situations are situational. So it's why it's important to not just look at the PFF grade, not just look at the EPA, not just look at the yards per carry, watch the damn tape. And that's going to tell you more than anything. And then you backload the information with the analytics as well. That's what these coaches are doing. So, all right. So there you go. A little tendency conversation in terms of formation.